Hey guys, I'm Mr. Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Rebel Moon Part 1, something of fire. And if you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description when we'll head over to my petition to help out some other YouTubers, so get there to my Patreon and PayPal where you can help support me and my channel directly, and to my Discord server you can join, collab, chill, and do all that cool stuff for free, and chilling will be reminded at the end. Now, I had not actually seen a lot of trailers, if any, for this. This actually just sort of popped up, at least for me. Now, I did do a basic search just to see if this was based off of something, and apparently there's a book of the same title, so I'm not sure if this is like a book adaptation or not, so I leave that up to, you know, people who might have read the book if this is meant to be an adaptation. But I digress. This is meant to just be a review of the movie, so we'll be focusing on that aspect. So we begin this movie with some narration, which in hindsight of after the fact does become some of it becomes a little bit more redundant, so I'm not sure why some of it was even included, especially with a 2-hour movie where you have a lot of time to definitely flesh out these little details within the backstory. That being said, we follow a simple farm village with a young woman here in the center poster named Cora, or at least her shortened name anyway, and for the sake and simplicity for the review, that's just what I'll call her. And a simple farmer are living out their lives. She was sort of brought into this life, apparently. We'll learn a little more about that as we progress, but we see as a group of sort of this army-like contingency group makes their way. They make an example out of the main villager guy by killing him, and then making their deal saying that they will eventually take everything that this planet has to offer. Now, in tow of this, or in lieu of this, she initially wants to flee the entire, area. She doesn't want to deal with this, but she sees that this other girl who these soldiers are like eyeing earlier, they are wanting to take advantage of her, bring her in, which is, akin to, bad things happening, but that is avoided when Cora steps in, and saying enough of that, and proceeds to kill all the soldiers in there with an assist from not only the farmer guy, but one of the other soldiers who decides to, who was already having enough of the turmoil that they were like committing against each other, I guess, at this point. So the area is cleared out, and with that save, it becomes clear to Cora that she must head out in order to band together these group of individuals who will help her fight this bigger, rebellion. And as such, she is joined by her former farmer friend, who I'll just call the farmer because I don't remember his name, and quite frankly, I don't remember most of the characters' names, which is a pretty bad sign for your movie. Now, a way I would explain this to somebody who's like maybe a bit of on the nerdier side of things is this sort of feels like a Dungeons and Dragons experience, but only one of the characters gets a backstory. That is what this movie feels like in terms of what I was watching. Her ragtag group of individuals have their own unique abilities and traits that they bring to her team as she folds them in. They participate as such, and behave as such, but their backstories are severely lacking. And I am baffled, again, with this being a 2-hour movie, that you couldn't really resign that much time and effort to any of these other characters, really? That just seems like you're doing the book, if that's what it's based off of, a complete disservice. I would have hated if a director was like, hey, do you want Syndicate X to get adapted? And I was like, okay, sure. And then I later learned that the only character that gets adapted is the main one. I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, there's so many other characters in that story that I'd be at a complete loss of myself. Like, if I were the writer of this book, if it is an adaptation, I'd be like, what the fuck, director? What the fuck did you do to my... How the fuck did you adapt this poorly? And it doesn't just help the movie independently either, because now you really don't care for these other characters. Sure, you can make, I suppose, an argument for the main character, but that's the only exception. So out of the ones that she gains, I think I wrote their names somewhere. I have to look on to the right for my notes. The girl with the 2 swords in the background there on the right, her name is Nemesis, according to my notes. The one on the extreme left, the one with the 1 gun on the hand, that guy is Kai. The one with, that's right next to her on the left is... nope. No, the one to the right of the girl with the 2 swords, I believe that's Tarek. The image is a little blurry, so I do apologize. Or he could be the one on the left of her, actually, I don't know. Which is which. But yeah. Let's see. So among the backstory, we learn that she was a soldier in the army, essentially, and she even ranked up all the way to serving the princess, and was a direct, link to this sort of royalty that was, pre-assessing the, this governmental army / takeover that happens in the movie. When this family of royals gets assassinated, this group comes in, they take this as a form of, they must rise up and squash any form of rebellion. And with this being a film that's very clearly directed in the fashion of the director, there's a lot of slow motion that happens in this movie. Now, I'm not opposed necessarily to slow-mo if it's used to great effect, but there are definitely a lot of instances here, like this bar fight that happens in slow motion, that do come across as extremely ridiculous, especially in the way that it's choreographed in combination with its slow-mo. Those 2 things in combination, in conjunction with each other, just wasn't well thought out enough, clearly. As she was, in the middle for it, in this setup, and then there are, 3 guys in front of her and 1 behind her. And she's, again, in the middle of the room, and the way they choreograph the convoluted way of how she gets out of that was just extremely messy. So, yeah. Slow-mo's definitely one of those harder things to gauge correctly when to use it, when not to use it, but it definitely felt like there was a heavy misusage of slow-mo here in this scenario. let's see. So we get some interesting bits and bobs. Like there's some little, like there's this confrontation that leads to that bar fight that I was talking about too, where the farmer guy is getting like flirted on with this alien guy, and they're not having any of it. So like he comes back with those reinforcements, and then that's what leads to the whole thing going awry. We cut to our main bad guy from time to time, and it seems like he has these little weird things that he like partakes in. Like he has all these indents into his body that like he like inserts this juice stuff into, and then like this tentacle creature thing that like wraps around him for some weird reason. I'm assuming it was sexual, because he was like, ooh, or like whatever. I don't know what the implication was meant to be. I mean, it kind of cuts away right after it does so, and after he says those little, whatever line he says there. So they end up on this other planet where they meet with Kai, who, spoiler alert, I guess, he ends up betraying them significantly later on in the movie. And he was a thief. So, you know, just, it's really annoying. This would be like one of those D&D things where it'd be like really annoying, where it's like, oh, the thief is the bad guy. Really? Come on. I don't know, it just comes across as a little boring and predictable that that's the case. But, I mean, it's also just not engaging, since, again, we don't even learn about him except that he wants money. That's, like, the only thing I can gauge off of his backstab. That's it. That's his entire character. He wants money. And, like, that's even more so than the other characters. Like, I'm not sure why the general guy, like, there's, like, this one thing for, like, each of them. Like, she was able to grab him because he wants revenge instead of being, like, lost to combat or whatever. For the Nemesis girl, I don't remember, like, why she wanted to fight the quote-unquote government in this case. Like, there's just nothing strong here in terms of, like, why these characters are on this adventure. And that's, like, one of the big things, like, I know I keep comparing it to Dungeons and Dragons, and I do apologize, but this movie does come across like a futuristic Dungeons and Dragons type adventure, almost, in the way that it's formatted, so that's why I'm comparing it to it. And again, it just comes across as lazy that so many of these characters have a lack of backstory. That is the thing that, you know, when you're, for example, playing Dungeons and Dragons, that adds life to it. It adds that, you know, layer that your players can explore themselves and each other and riff off of each other, become better allies or rivals in the case of the guy who betrays them in this instance. Like, that all builds off of each other, and it raises the tensions and the desires for you to root for the good guys. It all coalesces with each other in the writing process, and that all comes from character backstories and really fleshing out your characters. That is why in my book, Syndicate X, which, ever since I was a kid, even before I wanted it to be a movie, I wanted it to be a video game. Like, I specifically was drawing in these little folders, like, I wanted it to be a video game. That's why in the first book, I spend way much more time when I'm forming the team talking about their backstories first. Like, most of my first book is just that. And, you know, dealing with an initial big bad. That, to me, is the correct format to go, is, again, engaging in the backstories for these characters and really letting, you know, the people who are, who would have hopefully been reading it, which, ended up being nobody practically, but for the people who did, to be like, hey, these characters are really well fleshed out. The world as a, as a prerequisite to that is hopefully as well established, and, all of those things can build off of, how well your characters are coming across. So yeah, they go to get Tarek next. Tarek's like this prince guy, I guess. And his whole thing is he rides a griffin because he can talk to animals, I guess. And, it does visually look okay, the griffin, I suppose. I guess that's a cool looking griffin, or whatever it's meant to be. I'm assuming it's a griffin. But yeah, he soothes it, he talks to it, and then the other guy that, like, takes over the farm when he comes back is like, oh, I'm just gonna try, and then he gets killed for it. Because he didn't take the time to do the whole soothing thing. We then jump to them grabbing Nemesis, the girl with the two swords. She takes on the spider creature who's holding this girl hostage, and she's all talking about, like, how after they win, and this is, like, the only thing we learn about her characters, that, like, that could have been any of them, is the way she puts this, and, how, like, war kind of, it's like sort of the opposite of the guy to the left. That war kind of makes, anybody conceivably an enemy, or a potential enemy, rather. So we see from more of the backstory that when she was watching over the princess, that she learned that she had the capability of bringing things to life. We learn from the bad guy's perspective is that their charities, quote unquote, what got them killed. We're just told that. We don't see their charity. We don't, it would have been nice if that part was, instead of the opening narration, if what he was saying was narrated and then we got to a backstory of actually seeing the family. Like, that's how you use backstory and narration together in a way that's way more engaging. It tells you a lot more. You're visually seeing it as well, too. Now, so it's show and tell instead of just telling the audience what has happened. I think that is a much better use of it. So you're engaging in two types of mediums. So now you're seeing what the actual family was like. What did that charity look like? So we only do see the girl bring back this bird back to life and letting it go or whatever. So the last guy they get is that guy to the left there. And then she, like, offers the revenge. Well, actually, they make their way to, like, these two rebels that, like, the group was, like, hunting for this long time, and then the brother of the two ends up joining, and a few of his guys end up joining. And they end up on this transport where Kai is setting up to essentially betray them. He has them pull out all of these, like, cargo things without them, and the immediate red flag is like he's like saying, like, oh, don't investigate them, and he's like, nobody, like, suspects him immediately after saying that? Really? Nobody. Like, I would have figured the brother guy would have been the most sus of that kind of thing, coming from somebody of this ilk. But no, they're just totally chill with following directions, and they fall for the trap. It's like, what the fuck? Again, this would have came across a lot smoothly if, like, we learned about his character. Maybe they built trust from something instead of going from place to place to place, and then, you know, you barely know the characters, so you're barely, like, so, you know, if anything, again, all of them should be distrusting when he says that all of the red flags should be up for all of them, and none of them are. It completely contradicts what is happening, all within a moment because of how the writing is set up here. It is baffling. So they all get captured, 3 of them in these machines, and then the farmer's, like, on the footing. And they have, like, this massive ship that's, like, just right off the port side. The farmer grabs a hold of a gun, and I'm not even sure how. I have no clue how they function this. Because they show this earlier in the movie, where, like, this thing that's a part of this contraption that is holding these 3 up, it's like a gun-looking object, and the bad guy uses it on this guy that they're, like, gaining information from, and then he, like, locks it into the chair, and then it kills the guy. And then here, we see the farmer guy do it to Cora, and then it frees her? What is happening? Like, again, when you just established a rule earlier, and now you completely flip it, and then you have her turn to the guy, the trader guy, and then shoot, or have him shoot, the farmer guy shoot the trader guy with the gun. It's like, how the fuck did he pull that off? What happened? It doesn't make any logical sense with what we just established. Or previously established, so I don't know. We see that the brother goes after the main ship. He gets killed ceremoniously, and it's like, okay, why care? Like, actually, like, legitimately, why care? There is no setup for this character, so why the fuck should I care that he's dying? Like, so he has a sister. Like, what was his sister's personality? I don't know. Well, you know, it was nothing against nothing, and you get nothing. So he dies. It blows up. You know, and they're trying to play it off as super dramatic, but they're also, you know, she makes a comeback, and because the ship comes crashing down. And by the way, they actually do destroy the entire port. So, you know, our good guys probably killed a bunch of innocent people on top of their fight against the actual bad guys. So, you know, morally gray, I'm sure, is what they were going for. Sure, whatever. So anyways, they fight back. We have a one-on-one fight where she's, like, on this upper platform that's still remaining, and then the main bad guy gets on there, or was already on there, or whatever, or falls on there, I forget. Anyway, they end up fighting, and he, like, nearly knocks her off, and then she's, like, holding on to this cable thing, and then he, like, cuts the cable thing, and then she, like, re-holds on, and then has the cable thing as a weapon, and then uses it to knock him off to get the advantage. And then, once doing so, knocks him off the platform, thus killing him, and I put that in quotes because obviously there's a part 2, and obviously he's obviously not dead. So Tarek, sorry, not Tarek, but the other guy, the guy on the left of our main character, Korra, comforts one of the soldiers that misses the brother or whatever. And then we see them like returning to the farming planet where we see the robot from earlier in the movie with horns on for whatever reason. But we do see that the bad guy, once they're done, gets brought in by the bigger ship. We see him get like sucked back into this tube thing that has several tubes of like red and blue, and then he gets like sucked up and he sees the master, who just happens to be Korra's real father, who's the main baddie also. And then after his little talk of, you know, wanting Korra back alive, he is sent back as a you know, on a given mission, and that's what's going to lead into part 2. But by God, did this movie just suffer getting through part 1? Like, seriously, if this is based off of a book, and I had learned that, you know, this was a part 1 of 2, I'd be like, cancel part 2. Please, for the fuck of Lord, of everything above, just cancel part 2. It's not worth it. Like, just leave it as part 1. You know, get that out of the title and just call it Rebel Moon, and it will still be a terrible film. My God, this is an incomplete, not only an incomplete movie, as in, you know, out of 2 parts, obviously, but it's an insufficient part of a movie. I mean, you still had 2 hours, and again, the lack of absolute character is absolutely nonsensical. You had just so much time and you squandered it, absolutely, with such bare bones writing in terms of like who these characters are. Why are they invested in joining her? Like, seriously, go beyond just, you know, what were their lives like before? Like, what, you know, what is beyond just driving them? Like, there should be enough time to gauge something rather than a thing. I'm sorry, but a thing isn't enough. And sometimes that thing is so vague, you're just like, okay, so they're dead. Like the brother, for example. It's like, okay, so? It's just it's a bundle of, you know, just bad choices on top of bad choices on top of bad writing. Like I said, if Syndicate X were to get adapted, I would never want this director. Like, unless, like, I had control of, like, how things are being paced, what's in the story. Like, that's probably the only way. And I would also be like, you probably shouldn't do any slow-mo stuff unless, like, the action is, you know, it needs it and it can be choreographed in a way that is suitable to make slow-mo make any logical sense to be placed there. Those are the conditions I would need to have been here to be satisfied with an adaptation of Syndicate X to a movie. Because I would assume, based on my writing, is that Syndicate X would probably have to be 2 parts. Most likely. Just because of how many characters there are, so I'd probably would split it among 2 things. But still, like, again, this is easily, I don't even know, it's like a 1 or 2 out of 10. Like, this is barely a film. And I'm trying, like, yeah, they give her a backstory, which is, like, why I'm going, like, I would push for a 2, probably. But that's as high as I would go for scores in terms of this one. And that's my review of Rebel Moon Part 1. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, so I gotta turn to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. For my Discord server, you can join, collab, and chill, and all that cool stuff. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye!